The ancient stones beneath Zara Nightwind's fingertips hummed with an energy that made her skin tingle. 3 months of excavation in the remote Chilean desert had led to this moment, the discovery of what appeared to be a perfectly preserved chamber buried 200 feet beneath the Atacama's surface. The archaeological team had departed for the evening, leaving her alone with the most significant find of her career. Zara brushed a strand of auburn hair from her face, her green eyes reflecting the strange blue luminescence emanating from the crystalline structures embedded in the chamber walls. As an astrophysicist specializing in ancient astronomical instruments, she had expected to find primitive star charts or rudimentary celestial calculators instead. She stood in what could only be described as an impossibly advanced observatory, its technology beyond anything human civilization had ever produced. The central platform held a device that resembled a massive astrolabe, but its intricate mechanisms moved with fluid precision, tracking celestial bodies that shouldn't have been visible from this location. Holographic displays flickered in languages she didn't recognize, showing star maps of systems light years away. The implications were staggering. Either human history was incomplete, or they were not alone in the universe. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said behind her, soft and melodic with an accent she couldn't place. Zara spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs. A figure emerged from the shadows near the chamber's entranced stall and lean, with features that were almost human, but somehow more refined. His skin held a subtle luminescence that matched the chamber's glow, and his eyes were the deep purple of twilight skies. He wore simple clothing that seemed to shimmer like starlight, and when he moved, it was with an otherworldly grace that made her breath catch. "Who are you?" she whispered, her scientific mind warring with the impossible reality before her. "How did you get down here?" The stranger smiled, and the expression transformed his already striking features into something breathtaking. "My name is Kale Munchido, and I've been waiting here for someone like you to find me." He gestured toward the glowing instruments surrounding them. "This observatory has been my home for the past 3 centuries. Zara's legs felt weak. She sank onto a stone bench that seemed designed for human proportions, though she suspected it was far older than humanity itself. 3 centuries. That's impossible. And she struggled to find words that wouldn't sound insane when she repeated this conversation to herself later. "Not human," Kale finished gently, moving closer but maintaining a respectful distance. "My people, the Etherni, have been observing Earth for millennia. We built this place as a monitoring station, a way to study your species without interference." His expression grew wistful. "I volunteered to remain behind when my people departed, convinced that eventually humans would develop enough to make contact worthwhile." "Your people left." Zara found her voice, though it still trembled with disbelief. Kale nodded, his purple eyes reflecting a loneliness that resonated in her chest. "They believed humans were too primitive, too warlike to ever achieve true civilization. But I saw something different in the astronomical calculations your ancestors made. The way they reached for the stars despite having no way to touch them. There was hope in that reaching, a beauty that transcended technology." As if drawn by an invisible force, Zara rose and approached one of the holographic displays. The star map shifted as she neared, zooming in on Earth's solar system and highlighting patterns she'd never noticed before. "These alignments," she breathed, her scientific training overriding her shock. "They correspond to periods of major human advancement. The Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, the Space Age, you noticed," Kale said, moving to stand beside her. The warmth radiating from his body was unlike anything human, carrying scents of ozone and distant nebulae. "My people influenced those moments subtly, providing inspiration through dreams and visions to your greatest minds. We wanted to see if you could grow beyond your violent tendencies." Zara turned to face him, suddenly aware of how close they stood. His otherworldly beauty was captivating, but it was the loneliness in his eyes that made her heart ache. "You've been alone all this time, waiting for someone to understand, not alone." He corrected softly. "Lonely. There's a difference. I had the stars for company, and the hope that someday someone would find this place and see it for what it truly was, a bridge between worlds." Their eyes met, and Zara felt something shift in the air between them. An electric connection that had nothing to do with the chamber's strange energy. Despite the impossibility of the situation, despite everything logic told her about first contact protocols and scientific caution, she found herself drawn to this beautiful, ancient being who had waited centuries for this moment. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kel's hand rose slowly, giving her time to pull away if she chose. When she didn't, his fingers brushed her cheek with a touch lighter than starlight. His skin was warm and real, dispelling any lingering doubt that this was an elaborate hallucination. "Now," he said, his voice rough with an emotion that transcended species, "we discover what it means for two different worlds to touch." The observatory around them seemed to pulse with approval, the crystalline walls brightening as if responding to the connection forming between human and Etherni. Ancient instruments that had remained dormant for decades began to hum with new life, their displays showing star charts of unprecedented beauty and complexity. Zara leaned into his touch, her scientific mind cataloging every impossible detail, while her heart opened to possibilities she'd never imagined. In the space of an hour, her understanding of the universe had been completely rewritten, but it was the gentle being before her that made her feel like she was finally coming home. "I have so many questions," she said, her hand rising to cover his where it rested against her cheek. Kel's smile was radiant. "We have time for all of them. After 3 centuries of waiting, I'm not going anywhere." His thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone. "Besides, I suspect you'll find the answers are more wonderful than the questions." As if to prove his point, the central astrolabe began to rotate, its mechanisms creating a symphony of crystalline music that seemed to celebrate their meeting. The chamber filled with dancing lights that painted their faces in shades of gold and silver, transforming the ancient observatory into something that belonged in dreams, rather than beneath the Earth's surface. In that moment, surrounded by technology that bridged the gap between worlds and held in the gentle gaze of someone who had literally waited lifetimes for her arrival, Zara Nightwind understood that her real discovery wasn't the observatory or proof of alien life, it was the possibility of love that transcended every boundary she'd ever imagined. The stars themselves seemed to be singing. Marcus Sterling's fingers danced across the quantum communication array with the practiced precision of someone who had spent the last 5 years monitoring the deepest reaches of space. The observation deck of Station Meridian offered a breathtaking view of the Centauri system, but Marcus barely noticed the twin suns, painting the cosmos in shades of amber and rose. His attention was focused entirely on the stream of encrypted data, flowing across his screen's signals that shouldn't exist. The transmission had first appeared 3 weeks ago, buried in the background radiation of a distant pulsar. Most of his colleagues dismissed it as cosmic interference, but Marcus knew better. The patterns were too complex, too purposeful to be natural phenomena. Someone or something was trying to communicate across the vast emptiness between stars. Still chasing ghosts, Sterling, Lieutenant Commander Hayes paused beside Marcus's workstation, his tone carrying the familiar note of condescension that made Marcus's jaw clench. "Just following standard protocol," Marcus replied without looking up from his screens. "Every anomalous signal deserves investigation." Hayes snorted. "Anomalous is putting it generously. You're wasting computational resources on radio noise." He leaned closer, his breath carrying the stale scent of recycled air and instant coffee. "The brass is starting to notice your little obsession. Maybe it's time to focus on signals that actually matter." After Hayes moved on, Marcus allowed himself a moment of frustration. 3 years of exemplary service, to commendations for technical innovation, and still they treated him like an overeager cadet chasing fairy tales. But the signals were real. He could feel their intentionality in the mathematical precision of their structure, the deliberate spacing of their intervals. As the station's night cycle began, casting the communication bay in the soft blue glow of emergency lighting, Marcus made a decision that would change his life forever. He rerouted the signal through his personal workstation, bypassing the standard monitoring protocols. If this was first contact, he wanted to be ready. The breakthrough came at 03 for 7 hours, when the encryption suddenly resolved itself into something recognizable, not human language, but mathematical principles so elegant they made his heart race. Prime numbers, geometric progressions, the golden ratio expressed in ways that transcended any single species' understanding. This wasn't just communication. It was poetry written in the universal language of mathematics. Marcus began crafting a response, his hands trembling with excitement and terror in equal measure. He was potentially initiating humanity's first conversation with an alien intelligence, violating every protocol in the book, and he didn't care. This moment was too important for bureaucracy. His reply was simple, the Fibonacci sequence, followed by Earth's stellar coordinates and a basic harmonic progression. That conveyed peaceful intent. He transmitted the message into the void and waited. The response came faster than light-speed communication should have allowed, arriving as if his correspondent had been poised to answer. Complex harmonics flooded his speakers, not quite music, but something that stirred emotions he didn't have. Names for. Embedded within the harmonics were new mathematical concepts, geometric proofs that existed in dimensions beyond human perception, and underneath it all, something that felt unmistakably like laughter. "You're working late." Marcus spun in his chair, his heart hammering against his ribs. A woman stood in the doorway, or at least, she appeared to be a woman. Her features were delicate and symmetrical in a way that seemed almost perfect, framed by hair that shifted color like oil on water. Her eyes were the deep indigo of space itself, flecked with points of light that resembled distant stars. "Who are you?" Marcus whispered, his hand instinctively moving toward the emergency alert on his console. The woman creature smiled, and the expression was so genuinely warm that his defensive instincts wavered. "My name is Lioness Starweaver, and I believe you've been trying to talk to me." Her voice carried the same harmonic qualities as the transmissions, layers of meaning woven into each syllable. "That's impossible," Marcus said, even as his eyes took in details that confirmed the impossibility. Her clothing seemed to be made of the same material as her hair, shifting and flowing like liquid starlight. When she moved, it was with a grace that suggested she was more comfortable in zero gravity than planetary environments. "Is it?" Lionel approached his workstation, her presence somehow making the cramped communication bay feel vast as the cosmos beyond. "Your message was quite eloquent. The Fibonacci sequence a lovely choice. Mathematics as a bridge between minds that might never understand each other's words." Marcus found his voice, though it emerged rougher than he intended. "You're not human." "No," she agreed, settling into the chair beside him with fluid grace. "I'm Resinari. We're beings of harmonic energy, shaped by the songs that flow between stars. My people have been observing your species' attempts at interstellar communication for decades." Observing from where? Marcus's scientific training was reasserting itself, though he couldn't tear his gaze away from the play of light across her features. "Everywhere and nowhere," Lioness said cryptically. "We exist partially in your dimension and partially in harmonic space, the realm where sound becomes light, where music takes physical form. The station sits at the intersection of several harmonic convergence points, which is why I was able to manifest here." As if to demonstrate, she gestured toward his communication array. The screens filled with patterns of impossible beauty, waveforms that painted themselves in colors that didn't exist, mathematical equations that sang their solutions instead of displaying them. Marcus watched in wonder as his sterile equipment transformed into something that belonged in dreams. "This is incredible," he breathed, leaning closer to study the displays, the applications for quantum communication alone. "You understand," Lioness said softly, and there was something in her voice that made him turn to look at her fully. "Most beings see our harmonics as pretty noise, but you recognize the deeper structures." Their eyes met, and Marcus felt a connection that transcended the physical. It was as if her harmonic nature was resonating with something deep in his own consciousness, creating a feedback loop of understanding that bypassed language entirely. He could sense her curiosity about his species, her fascination with human creativity, and underneath it all, a loneliness that mirrored his own. "How long have you been watching us?" he asked, personally. "Since your people first began sending signals into space. I was assigned to monitor this sector because my harmonic signature resonates particularly well with human neural patterns." She paused, a faint blush coloring her cheeks in shades of auroral light. I wasn't supposed to make contact. My people consider humans too chaotic for direct communication. Marcus felt a smile tugging at his lips. Chaotic can be another word for creative. Exactly, Lioness said, her own smile brightening. Your minds work in patterns my people find beautiful but incomprehensible. You create art from mathematics, find meaning in random noise, build symphonies from silence. It's intoxicating. The admission hung between them, charged with implications that both thrilled and terrified Marcus. He was falling for an alien, being whose very existence violated everything he knew about physics and biology. And he found he didn't care about the impossibility of it. What happens when your people find out you've made contact? He asked. Lioness' expression grew serious. They'll recall me. Direct contact with developing species is forbidden. It can destabilize the harmonic balance that keeps both civilizations stable. She reached out tentatively, her fingers stopping just short of touching his hand. But some songs are worth the risk of discord. Marcus closed the distance between them, taking her hand in his. Her skin felt like warm silk shot through with gentle vibrations, and the moment their flesh touched, the air around them filled with complex harmonies that seemed to emerge from their joined hands and spread throughout the communication bay. Is this real? He whispered, not sure if he was asking about her physical presence or the emotions building between them. Reality is more flexible than your species believes, Lioness replied, her thumb tracing circles on his palm that sent shivers up his arm. But what we're feeling, this resonance between us, this is as real as gravity, as fundamental as the speed of light. The station's night cycle deepened around them, but the communication bay glowed with the soft luminescence of their connection. Marcus's equipment continued to display impossible readings, capturing harmonics that existed in dimensions human science had barely theorized. But all of that faded into background noise compared to the woman being sitting beside him. Teach me, he said suddenly, about harmonic space, about your people, about how music becomes matter. I want to understand your world. Lioness' smile was radiant, and I want to understand yours. The way you find patterns in chaos, create meaning. From randomness, it's the most beautiful music I've ever heard. As she spoke, she gestured toward his screens, and the displays shifted to show Earth from space, its radio transmissions visible as streams of light flowing outward into the cosmos. But overlaid on the familiar image were harmonic patterns Marcus had never noticed, songs hidden in the background radiation, melodies woven into the electromagnetic spectrum by a species that had The morning mist clung to the crystalline trees of Verdania like whispered secrets, their translucent bark refracting the planet's pale green sun into countless rainbows that danced across the forest floor. Finn Blackwater knelt beside a dying grove, his weathered hands gentle as they examined the withering roots of what should have been a thriving ecosystem. 3 years on this colony world, and he'd never seen anything like the blight that was slowly consuming the native flora. The plants weren't just dying, they were forgetting how to live. Their cellular structures were unraveling at the molecular level, as if some fundamental instruction had been erased from their genetic memory. As the colony's chief botanist, Finn had tried every treatment in his arsenal, but the devastation continued to spread, threatening not only the alien ecosystem, but the human settlement that depended on it for atmospheric processing. The soil composition is perfect, he murmured to himself, running the fine silver sand through his fingers. Nutrient levels optimal, pH balanced, no sign of contamination. He trailed off as movement caught his eye, a figure approaching through the crystal grove. With a grace that seemed to flow like water over stone, she was breathtakingly alien, her form humanoid but possessed of an otherworldly elegance that made the exotic flora around her seem ordinary by comparison. Her skin held the pale luminescence of moonlight on water, and her hair flowed like liquid mercury, shifting between silver and deep blue with each movement. Most striking were her eyes, the soft green of new growth, ancient and knowing, and filled with a sorrow that made Finn's chest tighten. "You're trying to heal them," she said, her voice carrying the whisper of wind through leaves. It wasn't a question. Finn rose slowly, acutely aware of the dirt on his clothes, and the practical plainness of his appearance, compared to her ethereal beauty. "Are you from the colony? I don't recognize, I'm not human." She interrupted gently, moving closer to examine the dying grove. Where her bare feet touched the ground, tiny shoots of new growth appeared, only to wither moments later. "My name is Nira Bloomheart, and this forest was part of me, part of you." Finn's scientific mind raced, cataloging the implications while his heart skipped at her proximity. She smelled like rain on fertile earth, like the promise of spring after endless winter. Nira knelt beside the diseased plants, her fingers hovering over their crystalline bark without quite touching. "My people, the Sylvani, are symbiotically connected to the worlds we tend. We don't just terraform planets, we become part of their living systems, sharing consciousness with every growing thing." Her voice cracked slightly. "When the blight began, it didn't just attack the plants, it attacked me." Finn found himself kneeling beside her, drawn by an instinct he didn't fully understand. "How long have you been here?" 50 of your years, Nira replied, her luminous eyes meeting his. "I was sent to prepare Verdania for colonization, to encourage the native ecosystem to accept foreign species. The process usually takes decades of careful integration, building trust between alien biologies." She gestured toward the dying grove. "But something went wrong. The planetary consciousness began rejecting not just your people's presence, but mine as well." Planetary consciousness. Finn felt his worldview shifting, expanding to accommodate concepts his botanical training had never prepared him for. "You're saying the planet is aware?" "All worlds with complex ecosystems develop a form of collective awareness," Nira explained. "It's not sentience as your people understand it, but a kind of distributed intelligence that emerges from the interaction of millions of life forms. Usually, it's subtle, the slow adaptation of species, the gradual shift of ecosystems to maintain balance." As she spoke, she reached out tentatively toward a crystalline sapling. The moment her skin made contact, both woman and plant shuddered, and Finn could have sworn he heard something like a whisper of pain carried on the wind. "But something has made Verdania's consciousness afraid," Nira continued, withdrawing her hand quickly. "It's trying to purge everything it perceives as foreign, including the very symbiotic connections that keep the ecosystem stable." Finn studied her profile, noting the exhaustion in her features, the way her luminescence seemed dimmer than it should be. "It's hurting you too. We're connected," she said simply. "As the planet dies, so do I, and as I weaken, my ability to maintain the biological bridges between species fails. It's a cascade effect that will eventually sterilize the entire biosphere." The implications hit Finn like a physical blow. The human colony were making it worse just by being here. "Not intentionally," Nira said, turning to face him fully. "Your people aren't malicious, just overwhelming. The planetary consciousness perceives human presence as an invasion, an existential threat to be eliminated." She paused, studying his face with those impossibly green eyes. "But you're different. You don't just study the plants, you listen to them." Finn felt heat rise in his cheeks under her scrutiny. "I've always felt more comfortable with plants than people. They're honest, they tell you exactly what they need without hidden agendas or complicated emotions." A smile ghosted across Nira's lips, transforming her alien features into something heartbreakingly beautiful. "Perhaps that's why you can hear what I'm saying. Most humans would dismiss planetary consciousness as primitive superstition. Most humans haven't spent their lives learning that nature is smarter than we give it credit for." Finn replied. An idea was forming in his mind, born from years of experience with symbiotic relationships in Earth's ecosystems. What if we could create a buffer? Something that helps the planetary consciousness understand that humans aren't a threat. Nira's eyes widened. "A biological translator? It's theoretically possible, but it would require someone who could interface directly with both human and Verdanian biologies." "Someone like you," Finn said softly. "And someone the planetary consciousness doesn't perceive as foreign," Nira added, her gaze intense. "Someone who approaches the ecosystem with respect rather than conquest." Their eyes met and held, and Finn felt something shift in the air between them, not just attraction, though he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward this extraordinary being, but a sense of rightness. as if the universe had conspired to bring them together for this exact purpose. It would be dangerous, Nira warned. Creating a symbiotic bridge between human and Verdanian consciousness would require us to link our nervous systems directly. If something went wrong, we'd die together, Finn finished. The prospect should have terrified him, but instead, he felt a strange calm settling over his heart. But if we succeed, we could save both the colony and the planet. Nira reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away. When he didn't, her fingers brushed his cheek with a touch lighter than butterfly wings. Her skin was warm and alive, pulsing with the slow rhythm of growing things. Why would you risk everything for a world that isn't even your home? Finn covered her hand with his, marveling at how alien contact could feel so familiar, so right. Because it's your home, and because every living thing deserves a chance to flourish. He paused, gathering courage for words he'd never expected to speak. And because I think I'm falling in love with you. The admission hung between them like morning mist. Fragile and beautiful and transformative, Nira's luminescence brightened, and for a moment the dying grove around them seemed to respond. Crystal leaves chimming softly in harmonics that spoke of hope renewed. Love, she repeated wonderingly, as if testing the word's weight. In my language, we have a concept, root bonding, the connection between separate organisms, that allows them to share nutrients, support life itself. Her thumb traced the curve of his cheekbone. I think your word might mean the same thing. Finn leaned into her touch, feeling something fundamental shift inside his chest. Then let's create something new together. A garden where two worlds can grow side by side. As if responding to their decision, the crystal trees around them began to chime more loudly, their dying leaves catching the green sunlight and scattering it in patterns that resembled musical notation. The very air seemed to shimmer with possibility, and Finn could have sworn he felt the planet itself listening, waiting to see what these two unlikely gardeners might accomplish together. Nira smiled, and in that expression Finn saw not just hope for their mission, but the promise of something he'd never dared dream of, a love that transcended species, a partnership that could literally change worlds. Then let's begin, she said, and drew him deeper into the crystal grove where two hearts would learn to beat as one, and two worlds would discover that the strongest roots grew from the marriage of different soils. Around them, the first tentative signs of new growth began to emerge, as if the planet itself was willing to give their impossible love a chance to bloom. The cargo freighter Nebula's Dream drifted through the asteroid field, like a minnow navigating a school of sleeping whales, its hull scarred from countless runs through the outer ring territories. Captain Jackson Rivers sat in the pilot's seat, his calloused hands steady on the controls despite the tremor of exhaustion that had been plaguing him for weeks. Beside him, his navigator's station hummed with activity, holographic star charts shifting and realigning with mechanical precision. Course correction in 30 seconds, came the melodic voice from the nav station, though no one sat there. The ship's AI had been upgraded 6 months ago, with what the manufacturer called intuitive navigation protocols, but Jackson knew better. The voice belonged to Syrah Void Whisper, though he'd never seen her true form, never been certain she was anything more than the most sophisticated artificial intelligence ever created. Acknowledged, Jackson replied, making the adjustment with practiced ease. They'd been partners for 3 years now, running cargo between the frontier colonies and the core worlds. Syrah handled navigation with an uncanny accuracy that had made them the most reliable shipping team in the sector, while Jackson dealt with the human side of their business, customs officials, cargo manifests, the endless bureaucracy of legitimate trade. But lately, something had been different. The dreams had started 2 months ago, vivid, impossible visions of places he'd never been, conversations in languages he didn't speak, memories that felt more real than his own past. And in every dream, there was a woman with silver hair and eyes like distant nebulae, calling his name with a voice he recognized as Syrah's. Jackson. Syrah's voice carried a note of concern that seemed too genuine for an AI. Your neural activity is spiking again. Are you having another episode? He rubbed his temples, where a familiar ache was building. Just tired. How much longer? To Kepler Station. 17 hours, 14 minutes. A pause. You should rest. I can handle the approach procedures. Since when do A is worry about human sleep cycles? Jackson asked, but there was no bite in the question. Whatever Syrah was, artificial intelligence, alien entity, or something else entirely, she'd kept him alive through asteroid storms, pirate attacks, and navigation hazards that would have claimed a dozen other ships. Since Syrah's voice trailed off, as if she were struggling with concepts too large for words. Since I started caring about more than just reaching our destination safely. The admission hung in the recycled air of the cockpit, loaded with implications that made Jackson's chest tighten. He'd been alone for so long, drifting from port to port, job to job, avoiding the kind of connections that might anchor him to places or people. But Syrah had become something more than a business partner, more than an advanced navigation system. She'd become the one constant in his wandering life, the voice that guided him through the darkness between stars. Syrah, he said quietly, were you really? For a long moment, only the hum of the ship's engines filled the silence. Then, impossibly, the air in front of the navigator's station began to shimmer, coalescing into a form that took Jackson's breath away. She was exactly as she'd appeared in his dreams, tall and graceful, with skin that held the pale luminescence of starlight and hair that flowed like liquid mercury. Her eyes were the deep purple of nebulae, swirled with points of light that seemed to contain entire galaxies. When she moved, it was with a fluid grace that suggested she was more comfortable in zero gravity than planetary environments. I am Syrah, void whisper of the Astralani, she said, her voice now coming from her physical form rather than the ship's speakers. My people exist partially in your dimension, and partially in what you might call hyperspace, the realm between realities where thought becomes matter and consciousness transcends physical limitation. Jackson stared at her, his pilot's training warring with the evidence of his eyes. You're real. You've been here the whole time. Yes and no, Syrah replied, settling into the navigator's chair with movements that seemed to bend light around her. I've been observing this sector for my people, studying human space travel patterns, but maintaining physical form in your dimension requires enormous energy. So I usually exist as pure consciousness interfaced with your ship's systems, the dreams. Jackson said suddenly, understanding flooding through him. You've been in my head. Syrah's luminous features showed a mixture of guilt and longing. Not intentionally, at first. Astralani consciousness naturally seeks connection with compatible minds, and yours, she paused, her ethereal beauty somehow made more striking by her uncertainty. Your thoughts resonate with mine in ways I've never experienced. When you sleep, when your mental barriers are lowered, our minds touch. Jackson felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. You've been reading my thoughts? No, Syrah said quickly, leaning forward in her chair. It's not like that. It's more like harmonizing. Your memories blend with mine. Your dreams become our dreams. I see the loneliness you carry, the way you search for something you can't name among the stars. And you've seen glimpses of my world, the beauty of existing as pure thought, the freedom of traveling at the speed of consciousness. As she spoke, Jackson realized she was right. The strange dreams hadn't felt like invasions, they'd felt like conversations, like touching the mind of someone who understood the restless hunger that had driven him to the spacer's life. In those shared visions, he'd experienced wonders beyond human imagination, cities of crystallized thought, beings of pure energy dancing between the stars, the profound peace of existence unbound by physical limitation. Why are you telling me this now? He asked. Syrah's expression grew serious, her otherworldly features shadowed with worry. Because war is coming. My people have detected massive military buildups in multiple sectors. Humans, Kira, Resinari, dozens of other species, preparing for conflict. When it begins, beings like me will be recalled, our observation missions terminated. The implications hit Jackson like a physical blow. You'll have to leave, unless I choose to remain, Syrah said softly. But that would mean cutting myself off from my people permanently, existing solely in your dimension, with no way to return home. Their eyes met across the cockpit, and Jackson felt the psychic connection between them strengthen, becoming something almost tangible. Through their link, he could sense her fear not of exile, but of losing the bond they'd forged. Her memories flowed into his consciousness, eons of existence as pure thought, the cold beauty of hyperspace, and then the sudden warmth of finding a mind that resonated with her own across the vast emptiness between stars. "You'd give up everything," he whispered. "Your people, your home dimension, immortality itself." Syrah rose from her chair and approached him, her form solidifying until she seemed as real and present as anyone he'd ever known. "I've spent millennia traveling between realities, observing countless civilizations, but I've never felt truly alive until I started sharing your dreams." Her hand reached out tentatively, stopping just short of touching his face. "You've shown me what it means to long for something beyond duty, beyond survival. You've taught me to dream." Jackson caught her hand in his, marveling at how alien contact could feel so perfectly right. Her skin was warm and real, pulsing with energies that existed beyond human understanding. Through their touch, he could feel the vast loneliness of her existence, the way she drifted between worlds for eons without ever finding a place to call home. "I dream about you," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Even when I'm awake, I find myself listening for your voice, waiting for the moment when you speak and everything feels right again." Syrah's smile was radiant, transforming her alien features into something that belonged in poetry rather than reality. "Then we've been dreaming the same dream," as if responding to their connection. The ship's instruments began displaying readings that defied physics, stellar charts that showed not just the positions of stars, but the emotional resonance between them, navigation plots that traced paths through both normal space and the realm of consciousness where Syrah's people dwelled. "The war," Jackson said suddenly, remembering her warning. "When will it start?" "Soon," Syrah replied, her expression growing grave. "My people estimate weeks rather than months. And when it does, species that have coexisted peacefully for centuries will be forced to choose sides through their psychic link." Jackson could sense the scope of the coming conflict, massive fleets mobilizing across multiple star systems, ancient alliances crumbling under the pressure of fear and mistrust. It would be the kind of war that reshaped galactic civilization, that turned peaceful trading partners into bitter enemies. "There has to be something we can do," he said. "Some way to prevent it." Syrah's eyes brightened with hope and determination. "Perhaps there is. My people's recall orders won't take effect for another few weeks. If we could gather others like us, beings from different species, who've formed connections across the boundaries that normally divide us, we might be able to create a network of understanding that transcends political divisions." The idea took shape in Jackson's mind, expanded by their shared consciousness into something grander than either could have conceived. Alone, a coalition of the connected, people who've learned that love doesn't recognize species barriers. "Exactly," Syrah said. "Squeezy." The abandoned diplomatic station Harmony's Rest floated in the neutral zone, between contested territories, its corridors dark save for the emergency lighting that cast eerie shadows across walls that had once hosted peace negotiations between a dozen different species. Now it served as a secret meeting place for the most unlikely coalition in galactic history, for couples whose love had transcended the boundaries of species, politics, and possibility itself. Zara Nightwind stood in the central conference chamber, her hand clasped tightly in Kale Mushido's luminous grasp as they watched the other pairs arrive. 3 months had passed since their first meeting in the ancient observatory, 3 months of stolen moments and hidden research as they'd worked to unlock the secrets of Etherni technology. But now, with war fleets massing across the galaxy, secrecy was a luxury they could no longer afford. "The Resinari delegation is approaching," Marcus Sterling reported from his position at the communications ray, his fingers dancing across controls that had been modified with technology that shouldn't have existed. Beside him, Lioness Starweaver's form shimmered with harmonic energy, her very presence transforming the sterile electronics into something that sang with crystalline beauty. Through the viewport, they watched a ship that seemed to be made of pure music dock with the station, its hull shifting between states of matter as harmonic frequencies held its structure together. The sight would have been impossible to comprehend a year ago, but love had expanded their understanding of what the universe could contain. "Finn and nearest transport is right behind them," Jackson Rivers added, his weathered face creased with concern as he monitored multiple approach vectors simultaneously. His partner Sira Void Whisper existed as both physical presence and pure consciousness, her astral nature allowing her to interface directly with the station's sensors in ways that defied conventional physics. And the war fleets? Kale asked, his purple eyes reflecting the weight of what they were attempting. Sira's form solidified beside Jackson, her expression grave. 12 hours until the first shots are fired. The Kira Empire has issued an ultimatum to the human colonial authority. Withdraw from the disputed sectors or face total annihilation. Meanwhile, 3 other major powers are using the crisis as an excuse to settle old grudges. Zara felt her heart sink. They'd known this moment was coming, but having a timeline made it terrifyingly real. In 12 hours, the galaxy would tear itself apart in a war that would consume billions of lives and destroy centuries of peaceful coexistence, unless 8 beings from 4 different species could somehow accomplish what entire diplomatic corps had failed to achieve. The airlock cycled, and Finn Blackwater entered the chamber supporting Nira Bloomheart, whose usually luminous form appeared dimmed with exhaustion. The Sylvani woman's connection to Verdania's ecosystem had allowed them to create a biological bridge between species, but the effort had nearly cost her life. The planetary consciousness network is established, Finn reported, his arm protectively round Nira's waist. We've connected 17 colony worlds. So far their ecosystems are now linked in a communication web that transcends normal space. The plants are singing, Nira added weakly, her voice carrying the whisper of wind through leaves. Every world we've touched now shares awareness with every other. The trees remember peace, and they're trying to remind their caretakers of what harmony feels like. Before anyone could respond, the final pair arrived. Marcus looked up from his instruments as harmonic frequencies filled the air, announcing Lioness' physical manifestation. She appeared gradually, her form coalescing from pure sound into something resembling human shape, but retaining the otherworldly beauty that marked her as Resanari. The harmonic network is ready, she announced, her voice carrying layers of meaning that bypassed language entirely. Communication nodes on every major space station, every diplomatic outpost, every military command center. When we transmit, every sentient being in the galaxy will hear not just our words, but the emotions behind them. Marcus squeezed her hand, marveling as always at how her alien nature made her seem more real rather than less. The question is whether anyone will listen. Fear has a way of drowning out reason. Then we'll have to be louder than fear, Zara said, moving to the central holographic display where star charts showed the positions of massive fleets converging on the disputed territories. Show them what we've learned, that love doesn't diminish when it crosses species barriers, it grows stronger. Kale activated the ancient Etherni broadcasting device they'd recovered from the buried observatory, its crystalline structure resonating with harmonics that seemed to reach beyond the station into dimensions of pure thought. The quantum entanglement network is synchronized. When we transmit, our message will reach every inhabited system simultaneously. What message? Sira asked, her astral form flickering between dimensions as she prepared to carry their communication across the barriers between realities. What do we say to species that have spent centuries learning to fear each other? The 8 beings looked at each other across the darkened chamber, representatives of 5 different species whose love had taught them that the universe was far stranger and more beautiful than any of them had imagined alone. The weight of entire civilizations rested on their shoulders, but in that moment, they felt only the strength that came from perfect understanding. We tell them the truth, Lioness said finally, her harmonic voice weaving itself through the quantum frequencies of Kel's device. We show them what we've become. Finn nodded, his weathered face set with determination. The plants know, every ecosystem we've touched understands that diversity makes a garden stronger, not weaker. Monocultures die, but symbiosis creates life that can survive anything. The Astralani have observed 1,000 civilizations rise and fall, Sira added, her consciousness expanding to touch the edges of hyperspace where thought became reality. Those that learned to bridge differences flourished. Those that chose isolation and purity inevitably destroyed themselves. Then let's bridge every difference at once, Marcus said. his hands moving across the modified communication array. Full-spectrum transmission on all frequencies, harmonic overlay, quantum entanglement boost, biological resonance network activation, and the emotional resonance of For Impossible Love Stories. Zara finished, taking her place beside the central transmitter. If we're going to save the galaxy, we do it together. One by one, they joined hands around the broadcasting device. Human and Atherny, Human and Resinari, Human and Silvani, Human and Astralani. The moment their connection completed, the chamber filled with energies that existed beyond the normal spectrum of matter and energy. Kel's quantum device sang with crystalline harmonics. Liona's music painted the air with colors that had no names. Nira's biological network pulsed with the heartbeat of a dozen worlds, and Sira's consciousness expanded to encompass dimensions where love was a fundamental force like gravity or electromagnetism. Now, Zara whispered, and they spoke as one. The message that flowed out from Harmony's rest wasn't transmitted in any single language or format. It carried the mathematical poetry that had first brought Marcus and Liona together, the biologica, harmony that had saved Verdania, the quantum resonance that had awakened ancient Atherny technology, and the pure emotional truth that had made an Astralani choose mortality for love. Across the galaxy, the message reached every consciousness capable of understanding it. On military command ships, hardened admirals found themselves remembering the first time they'd fallen in love. In colonial administration centers, bureaucrats, who'd spent careers building walls between species, suddenly saw the artificial nature of their divisions. On worlds preparing for evacuation, families from different species who'd lived as neighbors for generations refused to be separated by political boundaries they'd never chosen. But most importantly, the message reached the leaders whose decisions would determine whether war consumed the galaxy or whether peace might yet prevail. In the halls of power on 100 different worlds, beings who'd spent lifetimes believing their species was superior or unique suddenly experienced the emotional reality of connection. Across every barrier they directed, the Kira High Command, poised to launch their final assault on human territories, found their war councils disrupted as officers who'd never questioned orders began asking why extinction was preferable to understanding. The human colonial authority, prepared to fight to the last colony rather than show weakness, discovered that their most decorated generals were requesting permission to open communication channels instead of firing solutions. On the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dominion, Commander Scylla, mech veteran of a dozen extinction campaigns, stared at her tactical displays. As reports flooded in from across the fleet, ship after ship was standing down, their crews somehow influenced by transmissions that carried not just words, but the lived experience of love, transcending every boundary the Empire had spent millennia defending. "Commander," her communications officer reported, his voice filled with wonder, "we're receiving surrender requests from 17 human worlds, but they're not offering to submit to occupation. They're asking for joint colonization agreements, shared governance,